Welcome to my humble little office. My name is R. Keith Andrews. I am a spiritual guide and paranormal adept. The journey continues today on October 19th, 2025 at approximately 8 p.m. PST. Now, I bill myself as a spiritual guide because the tools I offer are the exact same tools I personally use in my day-to-day life. And the philosophies of life I talk about are the precise philosophies I guide virtually every decision I make by. Now, with this in mind, I know these tools will work for you because they continue to work for me and have literally worked for thousands of other people over the years with varying degrees of success, depending on their own personal efforts. Now, tonight we are going to be talking about the importance of communication. But before we get into it, I do want to tip my hat to Storm. He is our primary moderator, and he stays in the back for the most part to make sure all technology is running properly. And if we have a problem child in the house, Storm is very quick to remove them. Okay, if you look at the banner across the bottom of the screen, you'll notice there's a list of rules right there. So you suddenly find yourself outside the chat room, odds are that's why. You've probably broken one of these. And yes, because of a number of things that have happened in the past, I did ask Storm and a few other moderators to make certain that problem children are removed without incident. Speaking of which, we also have LA Moon in the house. Now, LA Moon is our primary moderator in the chat room. She's the one that keeps conversations going or asks questions when nobody else is, this sort of thing. Because to be honest, I work better when people place questions. But to that point, when you have a question, absolutely put it in the chat room, but put it in all caps so I can find the thing. Now, hopefully things are going well for the moderators, and we will be having other people. Look, we've got people strolling in already. Look at that. We are 2 minutes in, I think, and we've got 4 people. Yeah, 4 people in the room now. Now, the importance of communication applies on all fronts. Way too many people. What do we got here? We have Susan Ahern is in with the gold. How's it going, Susan? Glad you could join us. When we're talking about communication, it's critical that when you desire something, speak clearly and concisely about what it is you actually desire. The biggest problem we run into in this life that I'm finding is quite simple. But before I hit it, Christine is in with the silver. How are we doing, Christine? Well, feeling a lot better, and definitely healing and feeling better by the day. I'm finally down to the point where I can actually sleep the night through. Still a major problem when it comes to energy levels, but we're working on it. The biggest problem we run into with communication is succinctly put, summed up in a poem I wrote long ago called Words and Emotions. And I'm not going to recite the whole thing because, frankly, I don't recall the whole thing off the top of my head. But it starts off with, actually, in all fairness, it doesn't start off with yawn. But it starts off with, words are simply labels for emotions that we feel. Now, I am putting a poetic anthology together. Actually, I've already got it. I just didn't realize it wasn't 100% included or completed. So I'm working on piecing that together to get it on the market properly. The thing with communication is get a clear understanding in your own head as to what it is you're striving to convey. Okay? Doesn't matter what the topic is. This applies to your spirituality or your stance thereon, whatever jobs you're working on, or even if we are just talking about communicating with someone that means something to you. Okay, It's just if we are not clear with what we're saying, other people are going to misinterpret it. That's not going to be fun. I can see this being a fun night because I've already got a tickle in my throat. But when you're looking at communication, understand, and this is personal opinion really, if you're moving to a new country and you have any option at all, get a handle on the local, even if it's just basic communication. Get a handle on the local language. Okay, way too many times I see people move to a new country and they refuse to learn the local language. Okay, now do not get me wrong. Many of you find yourselves in a different country because you have to get out of where you are. Okay, in a case like that, do your best to learn as quickly as you can. But understand, when you're looking at asking for help, or when you're striving to convey a message, you've got to be clear in your understanding about what you're striving to say. And this is why I say, when we start looking at things, and because this is Sunday, yes, I do desire to focus on the spirituality side of it. Now, take a look at whatever religion you follow, whatever spiritual path you're on, and compare it to the paths that other people are on. I do believe you will find the same thing I did. Every spiritual path I've taken a look at teach the same thing. They use different words, but the concepts are identical. Okay, and for the most part, but what we have to realize is there is no right or wrong opinion. Okay, when you're striving to communicate with somebody, especially where it comes to about your religion or your spiritual path, understand they have their own. You don't have to agree with each other. It is critical you accept the validity of their path. Okay, whether you like the path they're on or can relate to it, that's another issue altogether. But remember, the easiest way I can put it is a discussion is an exchange of information. An argument is an exchange of ignorance. Okay, in other words, if you're just talking back and forth and everything's going tickety-boo, you don't have a problem. And Renee Andrews, you are in with the bronze. How you doing? Hopefully your day has been going well. You know, when you're looking at the whole issue of communication, it boils down to people opening the lines up and talking to each other civilly, not trying to browbeat them into believing what you're saying. Okay, understand, not everybody's going to agree with you. Lord knows not everybody agrees with me. Am I actually looking at that? You gotta be kidding me. No, you're not. No, we're still at 696. But communication is the way that people interact with each other. Now, I have found it remarkably dangerous in a lot of ways that much of the communication nowadays has gone to text. Now, I don't have a problem with people texting, do not get me wrong. But what's happening is people are forgetting simple grammar. They're forgetting simple communication lines. I even know people that instead of laughing, will literally go LOL while they're talking to you. Okay. Now, to me, this is a little odd. Okay. Although, that said, you got to remember with acronyms, which is what LOL is, they can be reformatted to say something else. I remember about a year ago, I saw on Facebook, there was somebody that posted, okay, and what they said was to whoever it was that told my mother that WTF means wow, That's fantastic. She goes, thank you so much. Our conversations have been so much better since that discovery. Now, I'm sure most of you know what WTF means. Okay. But when you think about it, especially if you're dealing with people from the elder generation, which didn't necessarily speak in as many foul words, okay, having a translation like that is handier than heck. Now, one of the big things that I will tell you where it comes to communication is the wider your vocabulary, the easier it is to really twist things around. Okay, it's always fascinating to me finding people with a wide vocabulary being able to take a word, and I do it myself regularly, where they take a word, pull it right out of context, and change and respond to that. Oh, Storm goes, WTF in baseball is walk to first. Thank you very much for that, Storm. Not being a sports fan, I certainly didn't know that one. But remember, again, with communication, and I realize language has become very lackadaisical at best. But when you're asking for something, now, first of all, there's a whole pile around that, but we'll stick with the asking. Okay, just for simplicity's sake. When you ask for something, say please. It doesn't take much effort. Please and thank you are phenomenal words in communication that so many people in today's world have completely overlooked. It's much like I found out a long time ago. You can get away with saying just about anything if you've got a smile on your face. Okay, now, I will tell you, you still have to treat people with respect. And one of the biggest things I look at is if you follow the 3 karmic laws as listed above, be true to yourself first, do unto others as you desire them to do unto you. Energy out, energy in. If you follow those 3 laws, okay, and you treat people the way you desire to be treated, the net result is you'll find your world goes a whole lot more smoothly. Now, one of the other things that we're looking at here where it comes to communication, the clearer and more specific you are regarding what you're aiming for, the easier it is going to be for other people to figure out how to say, how to accommodate what you're asking. This doesn't mean you'll get everything you ask for. Okay, but if you're not careful, you may well get what you deserve. Remember, you desire to be treated decently. You will find if you treat others decently to start with, you got a much better shot at getting the return. One of the other things I look at is when it comes to the language you're using, be sure to use that to speak in terms that make sense. Okay, that are clear and concise. The less room you leave people to mix things up, the better off you are. But again, you got to remember when you're talking to other people, you still have to take into consideration their level of comprehension. Okay, and understand if you're having trouble understanding somebody, it is imperative you ask for clarification. Because if you just go with what you think they said, you're likely going to end up with communication complications or miscommunication, I think is a better way to put it. Most of the people in this world today have completely forgotten what path they desire to be on. They've forgotten how to get there. And the whole trick to it is not just communicating with others. It's getting a clear image in your own head about what you desire. Now, for instance, I desire to have my house sorted out. Well, it's not going to happen by my sitting around doing nothing. Okay. It's not going to happen by my sitting there and praying that somebody else is going to come in and clean it up. I don't know about you guys, but when I was a kid, if my parents said it was time to clean the room and I didn't do it, because I was just being lazy, I was being a kid, and my parents came in and had to clean the room for me, you can bet I wasn't overly happy because they get rid of stuff. Okay. Now, of course, I learned from that. I still did the same thing with my own kids, but I didn't throw stuff out because I don't know about you, but in today's world, even back then, replacing stuff is expensive. Oh, there we go. I didn't notice that before. Storm just made the thing up for baseball. The issue of walk to first. Okay. And that's just how easy you can do it. Now, there are different acronyms that have been used by a lot of people. Okay. And some of them are really, I find them really comical. Some are really handy. Some are old as sin. Okay. One of the ones that I know when I was a kid, it was always considered an acronym. You'd always call it ASAP. Now it's become a word. People just simply, myself included, simply look at it, go ASAP, which, by the way, simply means as soon as possible. But like I said, the reason for communication, I don't know about you guys, but what I have discovered is that most humans, as a matter of fact, most beings, are not controlled telepaths. Okay, most people, they have an idea what they'd like to do, but many people have forgotten how to articulate it. And a lot of this is because of the way technology has taken over. I mean, the number of apps I see out there going, oh, use this app and you can write a story. Newsflash, you're not writing the story. Okay, use this app to make to improve your grammar. It doesn't improve your grammar. It is simply a shortcut that does not educate you. Now, I know this because I see so many people using it and still using apps like this and still messing things up. Okay, in all fairness, I can't really blame you guys for it. You've been taught to be that way, but this doesn't mean you can't learn to be more attentive to your language. Okay, it's kind of one of these things where I look at it going, when you desire something, okay, come right out and ask. Now, people that get lost easily, over time, probably have a much higher incentive for learning how to ask directions. Way too many people go, oh, I'm lost. I'm going to wander around. I don't want to ask anybody because that's embarrassing. I'll tell you, when you're used to getting lost as often as I am, you really get to the point of going, I'm just going to ask because it kills my stress. How many times have you gone through a drive-through window? I love drive-through windows. Let's not have distracted driving. Well, what do you call it when so many people use drive-through windows and they get food and or drink and then drink and or eat while they're driving? I'm not sure about you, but to me this qualifies as distracted. But how many times have you gone through a drive-through window and said something on the speaker and had to repeat yourself 2 or 3 times in order to understand, in order to get what you desired? I'm telling you, this is a growing problem. But then this has more to do with training and lack of attention than anything else, or lack of training, if you will. Now, something that I have found is when you've got a goal in mind, the clearer you are, and absolutely take a sheet of paper and write down your goals on that sheet of paper. It's a way of communicating with you. Okay. There used to be a trick way back where people would tie a string around their finger to remember something. Of course, I tried it for a little while and I came to realize I tied the string around my finger to remember something. And not only would I forget what the something was, but I'd forget why I tied the string around my finger. When you're looking at communication, if you're not being clear, it is going to get your message is going to get confused. Okay. Not only that, but you're not going to get what you're actually seeking. And again, it is imperative if something doesn't make sense that somebody is asking or is saying. It is absolutely imperative that you ask for clarification. When it comes to the spiritual side of things, I cannot tell you how many different spiritual paths people come from that I've gone, okay, that's the path you're on. What's the difference between what you're following and what John Doe is following over here, except the name of the higher power? Okay, or maybe the specifics on a given ritual, on a given sequence. Okay, I have yet to find many people that can actually explain the difference. Thing is, we all are aiming for we're almost all aiming for the same thing. You desire to be understood, you desire to be accepted, you desire a roof over your head, okay, and most of you desire a partner in life. Okay, and think of it this way. If you've got a roof over your head, okay, no matter how you came by it, you're in better shape than, from what I gather, about 85% of the population of the planet. Okay, now I'm quite happy. I've got a roof over my head. Where it comes to communication, again, it's not just language. Okay, how you dress, how you carry yourself is a form of communication called body language. Okay, now I choose to wear t-shirts and jeans, partially because I'm lazy, partially because, frankly, I'm financially challenged. So I just don't worry about it. In time, I may. But for the moment, I look at it this way. The way I carry myself does not put me above other people. Okay? I am not better than anybody else. I'm not, yes, I've got certain talents that other people don't have. Of course, I recommend you go to a mechanic if you want your car worked on instead of bringing it to me. Because the odds are I'm not going to be able to fix it anyway. But it is absolutely imperative. Now, I had a call the other day because of communication. Somebody was looking for a spiritual guide. Okay. And somebody I had spoken to locally here was talking to this person back east. Laid it out. Okay. Laid out what the options were. And net result, that communication is exactly why my business and why things are starting to change in my life. Because I'm getting a clear image in my own head. What is it I'm aiming for? Okay, now I will tell you, the image I intend on putting forth outside, like the outside of my apartment, yes, I'll keep it neat and tidy. The inside, I'm upgrading. But then I don't need people outside to look at me and go, oh, look, he's wearing a $300 suit. I got nothing against the more expensive clothing. But I will tell you, if I can pay $300 for one suit and I can buy 5 sets and I can buy, 2 pairs of pants and 3 shirts for the same thing, I'll take the change of clothing. Okay? Because I don't know about you, but I'll tell you, what you're wearing does not do much for your communication levels. Matter of fact, it can create a barrier because a lot of people will take a look at people, and I know you've seen this happen. You see somebody dressed, poorly, you go, "Oh, that person is dressed poorly because they don't have the wherewithal to do any better." Well, thanks for playing. I ran into a guy a number of years ago, very well spoken. Okay, lived on the street, and needless to say, looked like he lived on the street. Long story short, this young lad had almost $1 million in the bank. Okay, he was dressed in ratty jeans, a torn T-shirt, and a decent overcoat. Okay, but he didn't spend it on what he was wearing. Okay, he just simply bankrolled it for a later time. And when I asked him why he lived on the street, he says, "Well, first, I enjoy living on the street. Again, most people, that are on the street don't necessarily get there because they have to. Some are out there because they choose to. But the unfortunate part is many will give up the security of a home because the communication lines at home are absolutely disastrous." But this guy, he looks at me and he goes, "The second reason is I figure the government has enough money. They don't need mine." And I took that to heart. So right now I'm in the middle of rebuilding that. One of the things we got to remember about communication, it tells the way you communicate, whether it is clear, staggered, or what have you. Okay, it will tell people, it will help people draw a conclusion about you. Yeah, LA goes, most millionaires and billionaires don't look like that. They look very modestly dressed, or slightly less. They're not bothered as much by people if they look like the average guy. And the ones that are actually what I call proper millionaires, they've got the money, certainly, but the ones that don't let it go to their head, those are the ones that are the most benefit to other people. Okay, I used to have a problem with the whole idea of doing this live because, like I told a number of people, I said, "Look, the last thing I desire to do is find myself sitting on a pedestal because people keep putting me up there." And I talked to this one guy, and he finally got it through to me. He goes, "Look, you cannot stop other people from putting you on a pedestal, or conversely, from putting you in the ditch and saying, 'Look, you're dressed so poorly, you're just not worth my time.' You cannot stop other people from assessing you. But the trick is not to buy into that assessment. Wherever you are, whatever your finances, treat other people the same way you desire to be treated. The reality is, if you're dressed like an average person and you happen to have, a couple of $1,000s in the bank, there is no problem here. This is just a question of making certain that you treat people the same way you desire to be treated. When you're talking to people, talk to them as though they have a brain. Now, even with little kids, I will talk to children the same way I talk to an adult. Only when it's clear, they do not understand what I'm saying. Only then do I downgrade my communication lines. Okay, and the reason for that is because by talking to them as though they've got the intelligence, they automatically start seeing themselves as being able to comprehend. It helps them actually grasp the concepts easier, or more easily, is more to the point. Okay. If you talk to children, or more to the point, when you talk to people as though they are stupid or as though they don't get it, before you know who they are or before you know what they're like, you're automatically putting them in a little cubbyhole that says you can't communicate well. The truth of the matter is this: if your message is not getting across when you're striving to talk to somebody, the problem is a 50-50 problem. In over 150,000 clients over my lifetime, I have never seen a variation where communication was not a 50-50 problem. Either you are not saying something as clearly as it needs to be said, or the person you're talking to doesn't quite get the picture. In either event, it's a question of restating the concept in order for everybody to be on the same page. As long as you do that with respect, you'll find that this world starts meshing a lot more readily. You know, now what I'm looking at this point in time is I'm going, okay, how do we get this communication line up and running properly? How do we make things happen so that we can get back on track? And I'm telling you, it's a challenge on occasion, but it is not one that we cannot overcome. The catch is, are you more interested when you're talking to someone? Are you more interested in being right or in being comprehended? Okay. The reality is, I see this happen way too often. Somebody says something, it's not quite received. They don't quite understand it. So instead of explaining it calmly, the other person brings their voice up, raises their voice. It's like, okay, I didn't understand the word the first time. Now you're screaming at me. I'm still not getting the message. Okay, communication must be done in a calm and collective fashion. If it is not, you can bet your bottom dollar that things are going to get a little bit more complicated and communication lines are going to buckle. This is why when, even with driving, okay, communication can be done via polite hand signals, okay, in case of electrical failure. There are hand signals for being able to drive without signal lights. And they are perfectly legal, at least as far as I understand it. Okay, but it's simply another language. Okay, and what we have to realize is when you're speaking a different language than the person you're talking to, there's going to be miscommunication. So again, keep the language simple for what it is. Understanding when you get into the higher thought processes, you're likely to run into a problem with keeping the languages, simple. But I always start talking to people as an adult. Okay. I start with the concept that maybe they'll get it. Okay. Give them the respect to at least have the opportunity. And yes, I do agree. Many times, like if you've been trying to talk to the same type of people and they're all getting it wrong, okay, they're all not getting it, then it does not make sense to carry on the same path. Okay, and yet if everybody's understanding it, you don't have to complicate your linguistics. One thing I will tell you, there are words in every language I know of that are self-debilitating. Okay, now these words I've brought up before, but again, it boils down to utilizing words with a definitive purpose. And this is why, and you see me do this, okay, where I'll go, I can't do that. Well, actually, I really could. I'm just choosing not to. And the reason I do that is because can't is very self-debilitating. But if you change the word can't to can to, or just simply can, you will find you are far more motivated to proceed. I used to get a kick out of it when I was growing up. We go and ask dad, mom or dad, can I do such and such? And dad would almost invariably go, I don't know, have you given it a shot? Have you gone and made the effort? Now, again, where it is a communication line, and yes, I'm repeating myself quite regularly, quite consistently, and the reason for that is because it's one of these things that is absolutely imperative for people to gather. Now, one thing I am looking at is where it comes to some of the upcoming topics. I've got to get a whole lot more organized in order to actually get everything laid out. Language and communication is relatively a very simple concept. When you desire to get your message across, it is critical you are clear to the people that you're aiming and getting the message to. Point blank, when my wife first moved out here, I went to get her a bite to eat. And I asked her, because of what it was, I says, what size spoon would you like? And I'm thinking, originally I was thinking teaspoon or tablespoon. It was just a meal that could be, would you like a spoon or a fork? She looked at me and she goes, I'd like a spoon. I says, what size would you like? She goes, I don't care. So I brought her a serving spoon. She has not since made the same mistake. When somebody asks you what you would like, be clear. I don't care may not come out the way you're aiming for. This is why when I'm in a restaurant and a restaurant turns around, the waitress comes to me and she goes, would you like your bill? Well, I'm very direct with her. No thanks. Okay. I don't understand the idea of going, yes, I'd like my bill. I personally prefer not to pay for things. But, I figured they were asking, so what the heck? Communication is critical. Please learn a little more tact than I did. Okay. I was told growing up I needed to learn it. Right. I remember a millionaire asking me one day, I was working for a golf club, and he come to me and he asked me, more to the point, he said, go get me this. I looked at him, I went, no. Do you have any idea who I am? I looked at him and I said, no. Well, I'm so-and-so and I own such and such and so forth. And I looked at him and I said, I care why. Now this is not tactful communication. This is why I say learn better tact than I do, than I use. Because, a friend of mine told me years ago, Keith, you got to learn tact. I looked at her and I said, why? And she goes, well, tact. The ability to tell somebody where to go and have them look forward to the trip. I said, I got one problem with that. I said, if I'm mad enough to tell somebody where to go, why do I care if they're looking forward to the trip? Motivation is almost everything. When you desire something to happen, not only do you have to be clear with the communication line, but you have to be very aware of what it is you're asking for. Okay. If you're not going to make a whole lot of headway in all likelihood. Something that we have to realize is whatever it is you're aiming to accomplish in life, if you're not clear with communication with yourself about the image you're looking for or the goal that you're attempting to attain, okay, if you're not clear with you, you're not going to be prepared to attain it. If you're not clear with the people you're asking for assistance, you're not going to get the assistance you're looking for. Okay? And if you're not clear with your boss, the odds are you're going to end up getting fired. Don't ask me why I managed to avoid that. Now, as you well know, where it comes to communication, I'm about as direct as they get. You know, I am not one to sit here and sort of mollycoddle people. I'm not one to try and sugarcoat things. It doesn't work well, at least not in my experience. Sugarcoating so often has people turning around and going, oh, I'm going to sugarcoat it because I don't want to hurt your feelings. Well, I will tell you, I heard of one situation, where somebody turned around, they were asked to pass on a message. Okay. And, this is where communication is kind of critical. They were asked to pass on a message regarding somebody's health. Right. They knew what the health was like, and they were asked, how did the operation go? And the individual responded, the person died. Right? That's where the relay stopped. And then when the shockwave hit the face of the person asking, that was when they clued in and brought the rest of it up to speed. But if you don't think before you speak, you may develop the same thing I developed, hoof and mouth disease. I can't tell you how many times I put my foot in my mouth all the way to the hip and tried figuring out how to get the other one in there. We have to realize communication is the way of conveying ideas, okay, of attaining assistance, of offering assistance. If we do not communicate well, we are going to have a problem. And all around the world, now, yes, there's multiple languages. Absolutely there are. Okay. And this is why it is so important to learn how to communicate. Now, don't get me wrong. If you speak like I speak English and that's it. Okay. If you desire to speak to me and you don't speak English, odds are I haven't had the time and or the inclination to learn another language yet, but I will get to that in a moment. When you're striving to talk to somebody, if at all possible, talk to them in their language. This is kind of an important little factor. As a matter of fact, it's a really important little factor. One thing we have to realize is that, and this goes to the thing I was about to talk about, if you're getting on in years, in my case, I'm 62. This would be a good time to learn another language. So we're going to. How, I haven't decided on yet. I also haven't quite decided on exactly which language. But I do know from what professionals have told me, learning a second language as you get older is a way to stimulate the brain and potentially hold off things as annoying as Alzheimer's, dementia. The other thing you can learn is singing, because singing is a language unto itself. The thing with song is it uses a different language center in the brain. Okay, net result, communication may be a little bit more readily available. And this is why, when you look at communication, it is so imperative. Think before you speak. Okay, as my dad used to say, you got 2 ears, 2 eyes, and only 1 mouth. Use the proper ratio. Watch what's going on. Body language is another way of communicating. And here's one of the things you got to remember where it comes to body language, a real simple one. Okay. So many people specializing in body language have told me if you're crossing your arms, you're closed off. So I'm sitting here and I've got my arms crossed. Okay. Just curious how that shows. Nope. if you're sitting there and you got your arms crossed, okay, I'm told this means that you're blocking communication. Well, let me point something out. You got two arms attached to the shoulders. Okay, this is why you got to look at all aspects. You got two arms attached to the shoulders. Now, you can either leave your arms hanging by your side, okay, or you can cross them, or you can put them behind your back as though you're standing at ease. Now, I cross my arms because, well, frankly, what else am I going to do with them? It's comfortable, and I'm lazy. Okay, but everything that you work with is a method of communication. For instance, if I hold up this cup, okay, I hold it up. Pretty much everybody knows this is a cup. Okay, it's that simple. But here's the kicker. Because this side of the cup says nothing, okay, and this applies to t-shirts as well, by the way. Because it says nothing, you look at it, okay, it's a cup. Now, the question you gotta ask is when I turn it around, take a look at the sign on it. Now, do understand, I see all people as equals. Okay, but when you look at the message, okay, it will tell you what's going on. And this is why, again, now we used to have, when I was younger, we used to have bumper stickers. I am putting t-shirts together that will eventually, I found a place to print them, that will eventually go on our Buy Me a Coffee link. Okay, the Buy Me a Coffee link, as has been posted up here a number of times, is buymeacoffee.com/inner voice J. That is where you can find every book I've got, and you can look at the consulting fees, because I've been a spiritual, business, and personal consultant for over 50 years now. Communication is one of these things that you absolutely have to put effort into. Whether you're speaking a spoken language or sign language or semaphore or braille, it doesn't matter. Okay, all of them have a use. And frankly, the more languages you learn, if assuming you keep them separate, the more dynamic your brain gets. You know, if we don't communicate, think about it. You go to get by somebody. If you don't communicate to them and let them know that you'd like by, odds are you're going to have to wait for a while. Okay, so I don't know about you, but I find expediency is a good reason to communicate. But the sooner you communicate and the more clearly, the less obstacles you have, and the more readily your life can move forward. And yes, I know this is complicated for some people. Did I lose something here? Sort of. Not to worry, people. This is literally table salt. But it saves me a whole heck of a lot of hassles. Communication is one of these things. Find a way to do so. You know, there are many different forms of communication. We can take a look at semaphore, which is what they use at the airport to guide in planes. You know, at the airport, on aircraft carriers, they have a method of language that they use semaphore for. The North American Indians, before technology evolved, used to use smoke signals. Operation Shutdown, how you doing? Glad you could join us. You know, the nice part about it is whatever you're aiming at doing, if you do not communicate well, the odds are it's not going to come across properly. Okay, but all senses can be used in communication. Okay, whether we are talking about sight, ears, or touch. Or for that matter, and I know some races do this, I don't. Okay. Some races communicate very well by scent. Animals all around our world communicate by scent. LA, thank you so much. We are down to the 10-minute mark. The important factor from that standpoint is any form of communication you can work with is absolutely imperative. Remember, they are all connected. Have you ever noticed so many people, myself included, they will speak with their mouth and their hands are all over the place? Okay. Now, it's one thing, if you have to be deaf, you have to use your hands. I'm not deaf, but I do, on the other hand, have a tendency to talk with my hands a lot anyway. The fact of the matter is there are two parts to communication. The two parts being your speech operation is going. Keith, is nonverbal communication common with the off-worlders? Nonverbal communication, the short answer is yes. But nonverbal communication is common with every species. Okay? Language, as in vocal language, is a relatively new development in our worlds. Okay? And is usually the last form of communication that actually develops in any species. Okay? Many of the off-worlders don't have vocal cords per se. So they either develop, sign language of a form, or some develop telepathy. And even amongst off-worlders, between off-worlders and ancient races, even there, sign language is imperative. Now, in Western culture, if somebody points a gun at you or a stick or something, in Western culture and most of the places on Earth, we'll call it human society, you put your hands up like this. Most people realize you're saying, I surrender, without saying a word. Okay? Kind of important in certain situations. However, if we take a look at certain communication lines, you'll find that communication is one of these neat things that is not the same for every species. Okay? Humans make the mistake, and I call it a mistake because they should by this point know better. Humans make this mistake of going, if you don't speak a recognizable vocal way, you aren't communicating. This makes you less intelligent. Okay, or more to the point, marks you as being less intelligent. Now, from my standpoint, if you can get a message across without saying a word, this is a sign of higher intelligence or perhaps higher wisdom. Now, I will tell you, we've talked about the different senses being another form of language. So are mathematics and music. In case you hadn't noticed, especially with music, when people are singing or playing a tune, it conveys a message of peace, of relaxation, most of the time. It can also be used to incite riots. Okay, but most of the time when people are using music, it is to pass on a good feeling. Okay, to help people feel better about themselves. Another one, and this is where scent is a way of communicating. Now, it's a little early. We're still in October. But come December, I take apple juice, put it on the stove, okay, throw a little bit of cinnamon into it, and a few cloves. I leave it cook. Because that aroma, what most people refer to as incense, can very quickly affect the way you're feeling or the mood that you're going through. This is another form of communication. This is why I say All of these things are imperative. Just dawned on me. For those of you, for those of you who use cologne or perfume, take a look at the cologne or perfume you're using. What is your intent on using that particular cologne? Now, maybe it's a case of that's what your parents used, so that's what you use. Maybe it's a question of you're striving to catch somebody's attention. Okay. And that's where talking, communicating with somebody else comes in very convenient. Now, we just hit the 5-minute mark. So, with this in mind, I want to say thank you so very much for sharing your time with us tonight. Really appreciate it. Look forward to seeing you again tomorrow at 8 p.m. Pacific. Okay. But at that point, we are going to be dealing with stretching your dollar. We're going back to finance. Now, until then, do take care of yourselves and each other. And for pity's sakes, stay positive.